Hello everyone, I'm Jordana Van of Ravenlight Holistic Healing and welcome to Honeybee as a totem. Now, honeybees are probably the most sophisticated creature for which I've ever done a metaphysical analysis, and if I tried to put everything I discovered in this video, it would be at least 3 hours long. No thank you. So what I'm covering here are the most significant qualities of a honeybee person, not every quality. If you would like more info on being a honeybee person, please feel free to visit my website, which is www.ravenlightholistichealing.com, and book a session with me. I will be delighted to answer your questions then. So first, a few defining features of Apis mellifera, or the honeybee. Honeybees live in colonies of approximately 20,000 to 80,000 bees, of which only one is an active queen. Except in cases where a colony has been without a queen for too long, the queen is usually the only bee who lays eggs, and she's the only bee who can create daughters. The other female bees are called workers, and they do an assortment of different jobs in and out of the hive, from gathering nectar and pollen to defending the hive, making honey and honeycomb, cleaning, feeding the queen, the male bees, and the baby bees, and other tasks. Male honeybees are called drones, and their sole purpose is to mate with a queen. One thing I'm going to do from time to time in this video is reference the astrological sign Virgo, because bee is an extremely Virgonian creature. Virgo is the 6th sign of the zodiac and therefore rules the 6th house. Worker bees, who make up the majority of bees in the hive, live for approximately 6 weeks. The honeycomb, for which bees are best known and which is the foundation of their existence, is created from adjacent hexagons, which have 6 sides. Virgo's symbol is the virgin, and all female bees but the queen are virginal. So are most of the males. Isn't it amazing how all this stuff goes together? Also, while I'm not going to go into detail about numerological energies here, for those of you who are curious, honeybees are a bit of a combo between a 6, surprise, right, and a 4. So if you're a honeybee person and look at your astrological chart, I would expect you to have a prominent Virgo or 6th house placement. If you look at your numerological chart, I would anticipate finding a significant 6 or 4. To a lesser extent, you might also, or instead, have significant Cancer or 4th house placements, as in some ways honeybees are also quite Cancerian. You don't absolutely have to have any of these arrangements for honeybee to be your totem, but this is extremely unlikely. The reverse, however, is not true. Just because someone has a lot of Virgo or a bunch of Cancer or a bunch of 6s and 4s in their charts does not mean they are more likely to be honeybee people. So let's start with some honeybee qualities, which are also very much Virgo qualities: organization and efficiency. Honeybees are some of the most organized, efficient critters on the whole planet. Each worker bee has a specific job that supports the hive, and these jobs are defined by age. Everyone knows what to do when and does it. If more worker bees are needed to do a certain task, some will switch jobs until their services are no longer needed, then go back to doing whatever job they were doing before. At no point do worker bees just wander around aimlessly. While they are awake, each worker is in some way contributing to the function of the hive. The honeycomb is created in the shape that it is because a hexagon can hold the most amount of honey with the smallest amount of material. 2, sometimes the cells contain honey, and sometimes they contain baby bees, depending on the colony's needs at the time. Talk about maximizing your resources. A great deal of work goes into making honey, and the materials to do so are not available during the colder months, so honeybees are relentlessly concerned with their supply. If they don't store enough, the colony will starve. Needless to say, honeybee people tend to be frequently preoccupied with their security and will tend to be good little scrimpers and savers. These are the folks who know the balance of their 401k at any given moment, or if they're a bit more free-spirited, they will have calculated out their living expenses each month down to the penny and set up a precise budget. Frivolous-seeming expenditures will happen only once in a blue moon, and even then they're not all that frivolous. The honeybee person will still have thought about it and done a full cost-benefit analysis first. Honeybees have an extremely rigid way of doing things, and there's no room for an individual to step outside the box, as it were. They are the ultimate traditionalists, the enforcers of tried and true routine, and each worker bee is expected to progress through the employment ranks in a predictable order until it dies, with the exception of the brief job switches that I mentioned earlier. If you are a honeybee person, you're very likely going to be a creature of habit, prefer proven ways of doing things, and be stressed out by the efforts of well-meaning friends and family to haul you out of your little box. You'll be organized, analytical, thoughtful, single-minded, and meticulous about most things of consequence in your life. most especially your home and your job. And you will likely be more than just a teensy bit critical of those who are not equally detail-oriented. Lazy people, waste, and useless clutter will drive you absolutely batty. Now, we often think of really analytical individuals as being dry and stuffy or unimaginative, but this actually isn't true. Their creativity just tends to take a more organized form. For example, this is where we find artists who do minuscule detail work as opposed to those who do impressionist paintings, or the poets who write in iambic pentameter rather than free form or stream of consciousness, honeybees who create these beautiful hexagonal fusions within their hives, and whose life's work is responsible for much of the natural beauty in the world, tend to be the totems of humans who are exceptionally creative. For this reason, you as a honeybee person are also likely to be one of those folks who has a knack for interior design, or for beautifying an environment in a way that makes the most of the space. You might also work your magic outdoors in gardens or in landscaping. Creating harmony and the marriage of form and function will come naturally to you. As you would expect, honeybee people do not operate well in disorganized conditions. If you can't seem to get things done, it's a good bet that your space is a mess, or that things aren't arranged in ways that make them easily accessible and easily put away. You know that old saying, a place for everything and everything in its place? This could be the mantra of a honeybee person. Honeybees are also obsessive about cleaning, and so cleaning is very often an obsession for honeybee people as well, which it certainly is for most Virgos. If it is not, then you very likely fall prey to a classic Virgo pitfall, which is obsession with perfection. It would take so much freaking work, you think, to get the house back in perfect condition and cleanliness, that the very idea just wears you out, and you can't get yourself to do anything at all. But this just leads to a downward spiral. The more disorganized your surroundings, the more disorganized your mind, and the less likely you are to get anything done, and pretty soon you're feeling depressed and possibly ill. Very often, the answer to a lack of inertia or happiness in a honeybee person's life is simply to clean and organize the hell out of your space. Now, most of you have heard the phrase busy as a bee, which could easily be swapped out for busy as a Virgo. In fact, the reason that honeybees tend to die at 6 weeks of age is because their wings wear out from fanning them to make honey and warm the hive, and from all the flying they do in their final profession, which is a pollen and nectar gatherer. For honeybee people, work and responsibilities are life, and productivity is their god. These individuals take their commitments to their family and their community quite seriously and tend to feel completely unmoored when they aren't shouldering some degree of responsibility. As a honeybee person, your relationship with your work and your feelings about your relative degree of productivity and its importance to the world are inseparable from your mental health. If you do not feel that you are using your talents to their fullest capacity and in a way that adds something to the lives of others, you're more likely to suffer from depression and the related health issues. The same is true if you are letting yourself do the kind of work that you crave, but you are not doing so in a way that nourishes you rather than drains you. So let's take the first issue, being productive in ways that help others. Honeybees, simply by going about the business of being honeybees, constitute one of the greatest sources of nourishment, love, sweetness, and healing on the planet, if not the greatest. Our food supply is directly linked to bee pollination, and many of our medicines are only possible because the plant from which they were created was pollinated by a bee. Honey itself is a healing agent, an antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory that has been put to medicinal use for thousands and thousands of years. Propolis, which is a resin-like substance that bees use to coat the inside of their hives, has also been used as an anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial, along with being an antifungal and antiviral. Honey was also one of our first sources of sweetness, and for many people still remains the foremost way they sweeten food and drink. Many chocolates are still sweetened with honey. And think about how often we call our significant others honey as a reflection of our being sweet on each other. My husband and I have called each other this for as long as I can recall. And let's not forget about flowers, which exist largely because of bees. We give flowers to show that we care when someone's ill or when they're grieving. We send them as a congratulations, as a show of love on special days. We give them to our significant others as an apology when we fight, or we buy them for ourselves just because their beauty cheers us. If all that weren't enough, honeybees also make wax, and there are so many crazy uses for beeswax that I couldn't list them all here. So I'm just going to stick to one of the most relevant. Before electricity, beeswax candles drove away the darkness. They brought comfort and the ability to continue reading or working into the night. Here, bees are all about productivity, and their wax helps us be more productive. Candles also helped us feel safer in the nighttime, giving us the ability to see what's out there. And yet at the same time, candlelight is gentler, softer. It takes away all the hard edges of reality. And for that reason, many of us still light candles when we want to feel safe and relaxed. This one little thing that bees do naturally, and without which they themselves would soon cease to exist, has brought so much to us. If you're a honeybee person, there's something within you that is constantly driving you to use your energy in a way that adds to the lives of others. Honeybees benefit the world simply by being honeybees, and innate to the being of a honeybee is service to the collective. A honeybee's life is not even remotely about the individual. Because of this, a honeybee person, who we said earlier is a very logical sort, will tend to pour all of their energy into tasks and services that look like they should serve their family or community. These tasks create a sense of productivity, but they very often fall short in the fulfillment department. Now the honeybee person feels guilty, as though it's their fault that they're not able to be happy serving others in the way that they've chosen. The key here is being willing to climb one of the walls in your box and look around at what else is out there. If you feel productive but not satisfied, if you're working like crazy and yet no one seems to appreciate you, or if you are receiving appreciation in spades and yet you feel empty, the way in which you are attempting to serve the world is not aligned with who you are. This is an easy mistake to make. Remember, honeybee people like to do things in a logical fashion. Logic says that to serve the world, one must act in ways that obviously serve others. And yet, the fact that honeybees serve the world in so many ways is purely incidental. They don't do what they do for us, they do it for them and for their family, and we just happen to enjoy the results. So, honeybee people, are you doing what you do because you really truly love it and because it invigorates your body and mind and soul? Or are you simply doing it because you think you should and it makes sense? Another possible pitfall here. Are you doing it just because you think it will gain approval or will keep you from being perceived as lazy? If you're not giving enough of your energy to work that brings you true joy, no matter how it appears to serve others, you're also likely to exhibit some, shall we say, meddlesome tendencies. You will be one of those people who's always trying to help everyone else get their lives together in some fashion, and you won't receive any thanks for it. Or you might be the workplace martyr who makes more work for yourself, taking on additional tasks that actually bore you silly or make you feel taken for granted. You want to help, darn it, and you want to prove your talents, but it just never seems to work out in your favor. You don't get any thanks, and you almost never feel happy. The reason these things don't lead to anything that makes you feel good at the end of the day is that they're actually not meant to. The universe actually gives us a ridiculously simple way of knowing how to use our time and energy. We want to use it in certain ways. Very often these ways don't make sense, and we can't see how they could possibly help anybody, or they feel so good that we, who may believe that a good life can only come from hard, unpleasant work, view as too easy. That old, stubbornly pervasive saying, if it feels good, it's bad for you, which is in most cases completely, utterly incorrect, comes to mind here. There's also a bit of a myth in New Age circles that the right work for you will always feel effortless and blissful. Total BS, guys. The work that brings us joy and that we're meant to do, and which automatically serves others in some way, is not necessarily going to be easy. It may be hard as hell and require a lot of focus and determination and the occasional pep talk to get yourself to do it. But some part of us still really truly yearns to do it and feels energized by the idea of doing it. These totem videos, guys, holy hell, they take a lot of time and energy and focus to research and script. This one actually took months. And sometimes when I can't wrap my head around all the data, or the data conflicts, or the spiritual aspects are just so freaking huge that I don't know how to distill them into something lay people will understand, I get really frustrated. I must have rewritten this particular video 8 times, and that is not an exaggeration. But even when I'm tearing my hair out, I feel excited. A part of me really truly loves being challenged in this way. It's the same for my garden, which brings me so much joy and pride, and which also sometimes makes me wish I had never planted a freaking thing. The same's true for my music and for the really intense weightlifting and cycling classes I take at the gym 5 days a week. The feeling of challenging ourselves and succeeding is one of the most affirming experiences we can possibly have, which is why most true joys demand some effort. If you're a honeybee person, and no matter how hard you work and how much you succeed, you feel chronically angry, frustrated, unappreciated, or empty, you're very likely pouring all of your effort into work that doesn't do a thing to water the garden of your soul. Step back and ask yourself what you would do with yourself if you didn't have to pay your bills, didn't feel obligated to anybody else, and didn't really care what other people thought of your choice of activities. Then give yourself the chance to explore that thing, no matter how pointless or silly it seems. That thing is very likely to be the way that you personally bring sweetness and light and healing to the world. Now, sometimes this thing is quickly revealed as our intended means of making a living. Other times it's not. You might indeed work at another job and do the thing that brings you joy in your off hours. Honeybees communicate with each other through dance, the most well-known of which are the round dance and the waggle dance. Not every honeybee person is going to become a professional dancer, but most can dance, feel really great when they do, and delight others in the process. There's a reason dance shows are so popular. We love watching people move their bodies to music. It's a form of art. So perhaps a honeybee person is an accountant by day and does a mean tango at night. The bliss that comes from dancing fills them so completely that it spills over into their accounting job. On the other hand, honeybee people make excellent sign language interpreters, someone who communicates through symbolic gestures, just as bees do, and often to a large audience. After a considerable amount of time spent learning how to do this, they might very well make their living at it. The other important thing to mention here has to do with the fact that honeybees change jobs quite a few times throughout the course of their brief lives. If something no longer satisfies you, if you've outgrown it, no matter how good you are at it, or how long you've been doing it, or how much money you spent on your education to learn how to do it, it's time to change things up. Most honeybee people were not put here to do just one thing forever. If you keep yourself stuck, all that's going to happen is that you're going to be miserable, and the world is going to miss out on the contributions you would make if you let yourself change. And don't buy into the notion that no one else can do your job as well as you can, and that's why you have to keep doing it. Just like in a honeybee colony, where new bees are always being born and ready to do the next job in their evolution, there is someone waiting in the wings to do your job as well. Let go and grow. Now, earlier I said that there were two important work-related issues a honeybee person needs to be aware of if they're going to be healthy and happy. The first was what we just talked about, using your energy in ways that align with your true desires. When you do this, you feel fulfilled, and you're more likely to want to keep doing whatever it is. This is how you personally bring love, light, and healing to the world. This is also where you experience the greatest degree of appreciation. The second issue has to do with nourishment. Are you doing this work in a way that supports your own health and well-being, that nourishes you rather than drains you? The first thing to consider here is the idea of compensation. For some of us, what we most desire to receive from work is simply the joy in doing it. But what started as a joy can rapidly become a bottomless pit of misery and exhaustion, a curse rather than a blessing. If this is the work that you're meant to be doing, how can this be? One of the most readily observable things that bees give us is honey. Bees work like crazy to create that honey, not for us, but for them. It is literally what keeps them alive. And yet, we humans love that honey so much, and we have for thousands and thousands of years. So what happens when we love it so much that we take all of it and leave none for the bees themselves? The bees starve and die. Honeybees make numerous products that people deeply desire, and the same goes for honeybee people. Sometimes they themselves are the product. For example, they often become healers and counselors, which are deeply Virgonian occupations, and their loving energy is pretty darn yummy to a lot of hungry people. If they don't know any better, they'll feel like they have no choice but to give to all of those who ask, and there is an endless line of people asking. Similarly, Virgo's ideal is service, but it very often confuses service with sacrifice and then finds its efforts completely derailed by the resulting exhaustion and illness. When you as a honeybee person give and give of your sweetness and energy without ensuring that you receive something of equal worth in exchange, it won't be long before you are an empty, bitter, and probably flat broke husk. How not when you've given all that you possess to feed others? Where's the support and sweetness that you need for yourself? There's a really, really great saying in our modern era that the givers must set limits, for the takers never do. A mature honeybee person might very well have written this one. If you're getting joy just out of giving, and the joy alone truly feels enough, awesome. But when we give for a living, when we are artists and musicians, healers, counselors, it's more likely that the reciprocation we require is of a more concrete nature. We nourish the minds, bodies, and souls of others, and they must nourish us in the way that we most need, by paying us for our services so that we can buy our food or clothing or gasoline or pay our electric bill, or simply keep doing the work that we've been doing to serve the world. If you're an artist who gives away all of their work, unless you're independently wealthy, it's not going to be long before you can't afford any more art supplies. Hand in hand with this is our attention to our personal energetic resources. Do we have the time and energy to give to others? If we don't, and we give it away anyway, we are asking for trouble. If we don't feel like giving to someone, no matter how logical the giving may seem, or even if they are planning to compensate us, this is a signal from our higher self that the giving is in no one's best interests. We will harm ourselves from giving from this place. Or it's sometimes the case that the other person is going to be better off if we don't give to them. People often need to be left to fend for themselves in order to discover their own power. Honeybees are pretty docile little creatures. Away from the hive, they usually won't sting unless you step on them or otherwise really pester them. But near the hive, when you might be a threat to their honey and to their young, they are far more likely to sting, and that sting will kill them. Protecting their honey, which is their source of life, and their young, which is the fruit of their labor, is a life and death matter, and it should be for you as well. The difference between a happy, healthy, fully functional giver and an angry, drained, resentful wreck who is probably still attempting to give is boundaries, and whether or not you're willing to be able to have the hard conversations when someone tries to trespass them. Honeybees wear unmistakable warning colors. In nature, black and yellow are a clear statement of danger. If you make sure to flash your warning colors, if you make it obvious from the outset that there are limits on your giving, and that you're not going to tolerate those who try to take more from you than you want to give, you'll probably never have to sting. But if you just quietly go about your business, saying nothing, while people take more and more and more, soon you're going to be so overwhelmed and empty that you will have no choice but to take drastic action. When a honeybee stings, it dies pretty horrifically. If you get to the point where you have to sting to hurt someone or drive them off, it's pretty likely that's going to be the death of that relationship or that particular employment, or of a personal business venture in which you are not setting clear boundaries with customers. If it's a worthy death, meaning the threat was genuine, you'd been clear about your boundaries, and someone tried to breach them anyway, the death will change you. Your old self will die, a new wiser self will arise, and something that was toxic for you will be eliminated. If it was not a worthy death, meaning that the threat existed only because you were not making your needs and expectations sufficiently clear, you're just going to repeat the same pattern of self-sacrifice and loss over and over again until you accept that you can't pour from an empty cup. It's important to add here that when a honeybee stings something and dies, it releases a pheromone that primes the other bees in the hive to sting whatever's nearby. So you as a honeybee person are highly susceptible to mob mentality and to the fears and rages of others. In nature, bees are sometimes stepped on by and then sting creatures who have no intention of hurting the hive. The one bee sting I've ever gotten, that's what happened. I accidentally stepped on the poor girl. But those same attack pheromones get released no matter what. And now everybody is on the warpath for no real reason. Before you let yourself get worked up, ask yourself if you're not perhaps reacting just to somebody else's emotional state and letting it influence your assessment of the threat you believe you face. Things might actually be just fine, or you may just need to deliver a firm reminder of your boundaries rather than burning down the whole darn bridge. Now, honeybee people tend to undervalue the importance of their contribution to the world, and this is part of what often leads them to give without insisting on compensation, or to give when they need to conserve their own time and energy for themselves. It's just a small thing, they think, not that important in the grand scheme of things. So sure, I can give it away, or sure, I can take this little bit of time I needed for me and give it to someone else. One of the biggest reasons for this is that individually, each worker bee only makes 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in her entire lifetime. I would challenge you guys to try to find a 1/12 of a teaspoon in your measuring spoon drawer. I don't even think they make those. Considering that most of us eat honey by the tablespoon, this is a ridiculously tiny amount. 1 tablespoon of honey constitutes the lifetime efforts of 36 bees. And how many of us really stop at 1 tablespoon, particularly if we're slathering it on toast or dumping it into a smoothie? So you yourself will tend to think of your contribution to the world as too tiny to matter, while simultaneously others will have no conception of how much energy you actually put into it. As I said before, you need to be the one to recognize your limits and honor them, because the people who want what you can give never will. Now, an average honeybee hive can produce 60 to 100 pounds of honey per year. So as teeny tiny as each individual bee's contribution may be, it adds up. In the same way, the sweetness and nourishment that each of us are intended to receive is not meant to come from one individual. In other words, you are not responsible for the whole world. This is why the world has so many healers and counselors and artists and musicians and bakers and gardeners and dancers. We need an army of these people to bring sufficient love, light, nourishment, beauty, and healing to the world. You are one of an army, of a hive, of a whole team Earth love. You are not Atlas carrying the world on his shoulders alone. The same goes for your family. For honeybee people, the health and well-being of their family is hugely important, very likely even central to their existence. They would do anything for these people, and they very often do. Honeybee people will often find that they are called to set aside their personal needs to support their family members or community members that feel like a family. This is just part of their lives, but they need to learn to be discerning. Some obligations are going to be inherently sacred to them, meaning that even if they're tired or they're giving up something of import to themselves, part of them will still see the value in these tasks and the reward. In other words, these duties will in some way still be meaningful and add enrichment to their own lives. However, they may be equally called to take on responsibilities that can only be accomplished with resentment, becoming a solitary act of joy-destroying sacrifice that provides nothing of fulfillment in return. Remember, honeybees all do different jobs within the hive. No one honeybee is expected to take care of the whole enchilada by themselves. If you endlessly find that you, and you alone, are being called to surrender what is vital for your well-being on the altar of your family's needs, you need to recruit some help. Either get the other hive members off their derrieres to contribute, or call in some outside resources to share the labor. You will be no good to your family and community if you don't have a chance to live your own life sometimes. Now, one last thing regarding a honeybee person's relationship with their work. Sometimes the one making it utterly exhausting or soul-destroying, sucking all the joy out of it, is the honeybee person themselves. Remember what I said earlier about Virgos and perfection? Virgos can get so obsessed about doing things in the best possible way that they make it 1,000 times harder than it has to be. Or they aren't able to get started at all for the fear that they'll do it wrong, and that they should just plan just a little bit more or explore yet more ways of doing it first. But because there's always another way of doing it, and there's no mental way of knowing which one is right, their energy is poured endlessly into analysis and not action. This is the opposite of creativity, and it certainly isn't fun. I've got a bunch of Virgo placements, and Virgo Mars especially, so this was one of my little demons that I carried around with me for a long time, and yeah, it sucks. So, honeybee people and Virgos, if there is something that you want to do, stop analyzing it to death and just make some decisions already. It's okay if you have to go back and redo things, or if you change your mind along the way. Despite what your mind may be telling you, nothing perfect is ever created unless the creator is willing to surrender their attachment to perfection. And if you're already doing the thing, but you're starting to hate it, ask yourself if you aren't making it harder than it has to be. Playing my harp brings me joy every day, but there was a while there where that wasn't even remotely true because I had some very rigid ideas about technical perfection that kept me from just relaxing into the experience of making music. I don't play professionally, so there was no reason I needed to do this to myself. When I accepted this and just let myself enjoy the experience of making music as an amateur harper, I began to really love it, and I quickly got better and better at it. My obsession with perfection was actually holding me back from improving. Now we're going to talk about the drones, or the male bees, for just a little bit, and we're actually going to start by comparing them to the females. Females do all the work in the hive, all of it. The males just sit and receive food from the workers until they are ready to make their attempt at mating with a queen. The workers actually also make all the decisions, up to and including the decision to throw the males out of the hive before winter, so they'll starve or freeze. The workers are all virginal, while the males exist only to have sex. 2, the females have stingers, while the males do not. The males have one purpose and no power. Only 1 in every 1,000 drones succeeds in mating with a queen, and he dies immediately afterwards because, let's just say that he loses his equipment in the process, shall we? The rest of the drones just hover around the mating's rendezvous site, waiting for the queen to return or another to show, and this may not happen, in which case he'll either die waiting or he'll die when his sisters kick him out before winter. So this dichotomy can translate in a couple of ways for honeybee people. First, if you're a man or you identify as male, and honeybee is one of your totems, it's more likely that your personal history includes experiencing an imbalance of power where women are concerned. You may put them on a pedestal and see them as far more powerful than you are and be totally okay with that. You may desire them ardently while feeling absolutely petrified that they will destroy you. You might experience them as emasculating. It's also likely that you got a bit of a love-hate relationship with mom. You admired her or yearned for her attention while simultaneously being infuriated or saddened by how often she ignored you or minimized your needs. It's also probable that the person who had the biggest hand in raising you was not your mother, but a sister or an aunt, and at some point you felt that they abandoned you. This is definitely not the place to try to explain how to resolve mother issues, as I could do a whole video series on that. But guys, the way in which you view women in your life is going to be heavily influenced by how you experienced your relationship with your mother and what you observed of your father's relationship with your mother. If there were difficulties, and if you haven't addressed these and released the wounds and limiting beliefs they created, you're going to project these issues onto your own relationships with women. If you are a woman or you identify as female, you're more likely to attract men who expect you to coddle them, mother them, or support them financially. These men are also frequently very sensitive, dreamy sorts with an inherent lack of self-confidence that you will find yourself over-nurturing in some fashion, meeting the needs that you wish he would meet for himself, and thus enabling his continued extended childhood. In this case, healing tends to begin with looking at the role you played in your early family life. Chances are you were the caretaker to a mother, father, and or siblings who just could not seem to get their act together, or who were in some other way unable to care for themselves. And you've played this role over and over and over in your life ever since. Healing here is not about demonizing your urge to care for others, but learning the importance of providing sufficient self-care before other care, and that people sometimes need to be left to take care of themselves, even when it scares us. When we're talking about honeybee people in general, you're going to feel at your most vulnerable, your most powerless, when you aren't working or otherwise being productive. And you may begin to fixate on love or sex as being the thing that's going to fix you. If you can just get some great sex, you think, or find the right uber amazing fantasy mate, then your life will have some meaning. But this is never going to be the solution you hope for. When you fixate on a relationship as being the thing that will save you, even if you do find a relationship, it's very likely going to end quickly and in explosive fashion. You're also going to tend to wind up feeling used. This isn't to say that honeybee people don't get to have relationships or great sex, far from it, but that they are more likely to receive this when they don't perceive a relationship as their salvation. The happiest, most satisfied, and most confident honeybee people focus on their work, and their contribution to the community. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and they make an effort to meet people of like mind and intention. They get involved in community building. They nurture others. They're creative. They engage their feminine qualities. Now, you can still be a very manly man and be a creative, nurturing individual, so this is not about becoming less of a male in any way, shape, or form. We all have within us male and female energies, so what you're doing here is consciously accessing other parts of yourself and allowing them to surface, not suppressing or changing parts of yourself that you like. There's a very clear distinction here. So, what about the queen? The queen is often seen as the most important bee in the colony, and she's certainly the largest, but her level of influence is totally at odds with her title. Any female bee can become the queen, and she has zero choice in the matter. Workers choose which females will become queens, and then they feed these bees a substance they make within their bodies called royal jelly for the duration of their development, while bees that will become workers are switched to a diet of honey and pollen on day 4. Workers create the queen, and then they may kill her when she ceases to lay eggs. The queen also does not direct activity in the hive, at least not intentionally. She produces chemical signals that guide the hive's daily tasks and functions, but these happen instinctively. When the hive is so full of bees that her pheromones cannot be easily detected by each individual bee, the workers know to create a new batch of queens so that a portion of the bees in the hive can depart with her in what is called a swarm, setting up a new hive elsewhere. For most of her life, all the queen does is lay eggs at a rate of approximately 2,000 per day. That's it. Worker bees even chew her food for her because she can't digest it on her own, and feed her, clean her, and remove her waste for her. And while she does live the longest of all the bees in the hive, she only has a maximum of 4 mating flights in her life, all accomplished in short order when she's young. Every egg she lays is a product of these early flights. When it's time for the hive to swarm, the workers actually starve her and shake her continuously to get her to move around. This is because she's gotten quite fat while lying around doing nothing but eating and egg laying, and she has to lose 1/3 of her body weight in order to fly. Remember too, she doesn't decide when it's time to swarm, and she doesn't even pick the new nesting site. This occurs through a democratic vote made by the workers. The only time in which the queen appears to make a decision for herself is just after she's hatched, which occurs after a swarm has departed from the hive. Workers usually make more than one queen because this gives them the best chance of raising a strong, healthy one. When the first daughter queen hatches, she can choose to leave the hive with another swarm of bees, or she can stay. If she stays, she must kill the other daughter queens, who are usually still in their larval cells. The workers help her chew away the wax that caps these cells, and then she kills them with her stinger, which, unlike those of the workers, can be used multiple times. If another queen hatches at the same time that she does, they will fight to the death. So what does all this mean for a honeybee person? On the upside, it means that you have the potential to be a creator that affects an enormous number of people. If any worker can be queen, then so can any honeybee person become the visible center of a community's functioning. However, it also means that no matter how hard you try or how cleverly you plan, this is not going to be an outcome that you can consciously create for yourself. If you do find yourself in a position to support a whole community with your gifts, it will be because forces over which you have absolutely no control picked you for the role. There's also going to be a lot of sacrifice involved. You'll have to set aside the trappings of a normal life in exchange for your life as queen. The queen almost never leaves the hive, only mates a handful of times at the beginning of her life, and her entire existence is devoted to laying eggs. While she's ensuring the continuation of an entire species, she's at the mercy of those she created and has no real say in her life. She can't even feed herself. And let's not forget that those who created her will kill her when she ceases to be useful. Not every honeybee person is going to have the experience of being queen. Remember, there's one queen for up to 80,000 bees. But if you do, it will feel like destiny. Suddenly, miraculously, you have the chance to be the star of the show. And if you hesitate, it's likely to be lost. Commit, and you'll settle into a period of everyone wanting to cater to your every need so that you can focus entirely on doing whatever it is that has made you so desirable. And this thing is going to be the only thing that you do. You will eat, breathe, and sleep this thing, and you will be adored for it. And then one day, just when things seem to be going really great, everyone turns on you They stop giving you what you want, and they push you out of your comfort zone. You'll be asked to accept a dramatic change of scene, and it may not feel that great at first. But once the transition's made, you'll go back to creating as you did before, and all will return to normal, and this is probably going to happen a few times. Until, to your dismay, you start to notice that you aren't able to create as much as you were before. You're slowing down, and your creations aren't as vibrant. You'll have some warning before it's all over, but at a certain point, the queen has to surrender her throne to someone younger. It's going to feel like everyone you trusted is turning on you, and you'll realize it wasn't you they adored, it was what you could do for them. This is probably going to feel pretty icky. But this doesn't mean that your life is over, only your time as queen. You'll have to see to the mundane details of life again, and you'll have to be a self-starter. You'll have to interact with people who aren't simply there to encourage and flatter you. And you're going to have to let go of whatever you were doing as a creator and try something new. It might feel like death, but it is actually a whole new beginning for you, and it can lead to a really beautiful life. So I hope this has given you guys a good understanding of honeybee people, but if you would like further information, you are welcome to schedule a session with me. I work with people all over the world to help them understand the unique messages of their animal totems and spirit guides, and also to help with physical and emotional healing, dream interpretation, figuring out what the heck you're here to do with yourself, and about a billion other things. And I would love to work with you as well. This is what I do for a living, and it's awesome. And if you are interested in working with me, you can visit my website, which is www.ravenlightholistichealing.com. It'll tell you exactly what I do, what to expect, what I charge, how to book a session with me, and all that good stuff. You can also follow my work on Facebook and Instagram at Ravenlight Holistic Healing. And while I understand if you would like my professional opinion on your spiritual situation, I do not provide this outside of a formal session under any circumstances. So if you're interested in my opinion or guidance, please book a session. Have a very happy day, my darlings. Cheers.